Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
6 years and counting. Well, that's where we are in this expansionary part of the business cycle. Not recovery, but expanding, and in fact, still growing. Glad you have joined this discussion. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy across both in North and South Carolina for 25 years now. I'm Chris William, and this time Bryan Toney of UNCG and Terry Keating of the Palmetto States Accord Financial help us start this week's conversation. And later on, why should health insurance get all of the press? Tim Arnold, CEO of Colonial Life, will wade into that debate. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Terry Keating of Accord Financial, Bryan Toney from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and special guest Tim Arnold, President and CEO of Colonial Life. Now, here's Chris William.
Terry, Bryan, good to have you both here. Welcome. Happy spring. Jesus, is great, isn't it? Finally. Bryan, let's start with you. You know, North Carolina, it's not lost in this program, not lost on a lot of people. North Carolina has been trying to restart its economic development engine. The General Assembly's been trying to find a way, or at least debate about how can we fund it. Our economic incentive's good. You know, we're back in that kind of that area of debate. But Greensboro, the Triad, Winston-Salem, and High Point's in the mix, of course. The Triad seems to have its own set of issues on top of the fact that North Carolina is trying to reset its economic development machine. It's been a kind of a start again, stop again initiative going on in the Triad. What is that a fair assessment? And how does the Triad find its momentum in economic development? What's the strong point? What's the debate?
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. Oftentimes the Triangle area, Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill, and Charlotte get all the attention in North Carolina. But the Triad is really coming along strong. Yeah, there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of buzz happening right now. Yeah, we've had an industry based on textiles and furniture manufacturing and tobacco, and of course all those industries are gone. Some of the jobs will come back, but we're really having to reinvent ourselves. The cities, the downtown areas have a lot of vibrancy. We're getting much better at attracting and retaining young talent. You know, it's the kind of places where millennials want to live, work, and play. And you know, I think our universities have really stepped up to try to play a major role in that. We're really changing how we view economic development. It's more than just real estate projects and university spinoffs, but more about capacity building.
So can Elon, UNCG, and any of the schools that are endemic to the region, do they take the lead in economic development?
We take the lead together, and actually I think that's one of the great things about our region. We work together very well. We're partnering with other universities on a number of projects. Mm-hmm. Just two weeks ago we announced a university engagement office that we're opening at HQ Greensboro in downtown Greensboro. That's a shared office with our sister university, North Carolina A&T. We're working on another project to potentially open a Global Opportunities Center, which would be a collaboration of 7 universities to try to leverage a lot of our international talent to help the small and medium-sized businesses in the area expand globally.
Is there a different buzz than there has been in the past? I mean, truly a different buzz?
Most definitely. I've only been in Greensboro for 4 years, and it's a night and day difference. I think the level of activity that's happening, just looking at our downtown areas, and it's the same in Winston-Salem. has created a buzz that's really, you really notice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, so Terry, we'll bring you into this dialogue, maybe from a different point of view. Hailing from upstate South Carolina, Greenville, I mean, talk about a buzz and some momentum. There's a lot going there, but let me get down into kind of the weeds of your business, Terry. So you do financing, inventory financing, and receivables financing, and that is a different demographic in business, small to mid-sized businesses. That the credit quality maybe is not at the top of the house. What do you see anecdotally in that space that may give us an idea of where this economy's headed?
Sure, Chris. So what we see is kind of choppy growth, if you will, but steady growth. And what we're not seeing, and maybe that's more the story, we're not seeing businesses faltering and falling back as much as we did, certainly not in the recession, but generally it's a growth story. And the trick is, how do we grow? And companies being challenged with finding new ways to grow in a slower growing economy.
Well, tell me about that, though. That's an interesting, I mean, you just said it's been choppy but steady, but you haven't seen businesses failing?
Not
really?
No, we really don't. I mean, when we look at our credit demographics over the last few years, it's been almost pristine. And that's true not just for Accord, it's true across the industry. Yeah. We've really been on an upswing, and everyone's enjoying this kind of generally good credit health, because the economy, having sunk so far, is like, well, you can only go up from here.
As we all have heard the Fed takes, center stage every time the Fed meets, and everybody waits on every single word that Janice Yellen and everybody that talks around the Fed. So there will be an interest rate increase. I think we can probably 90% say that in 2015. The rates will go up. Is there something defensive that businesses are doing now? Is it not an issue for business? Is it a big issue for business?
We don't see it as a big issue for business. I mean, first of all, you have to remember where interest rates are. Yeah, they're going to go up, but they're going up from historic lows. This isn't like the 1980s or when we had interest rates in the high teens, and that was hard for business. At the rates they are, they can go up significantly relative to the Fed rates without really impacting people's business models. And frankly, I think a lot of business owners, we've just been lured to sleep with the fact that we've had these low interest rates for as long as we have. And although they may go up, it's hard to see when you look at the landscape how they're going to go up very far. It's not just what's going on in America, it's what's going on elsewhere in the world.
So same thing though, Brian, if rates go up, does that take a lot of the steam out of the economic development plans in the triad?
No, I think I agree. Because we are at historic lows, I don't think that's going to have that much of an impact. What we do need though is more private capital. Yeah. One of the things we're noticing, particularly in the triad, is we get a lot of good ideas for new businesses, but that early stage risk capital is not quite there where it needs to be. Just recently, someone mentioned the Emerging Issues Forum in Raleigh that North Carolina and South Carolina have plenty of capital. We just needed some of it to be a little less risk averse, particularly for those early stage startups.
Which brings up a good point. North Carolina State Treasurer Janet Cowell came out with the second innovation fund, about $250 million. You're nodding like that's a good thing. Is it a good thing?
That is a great thing. Yeah. And I think we need more of that. And again, we need even one step back from there. What can we do to help those people that are just at that idea stage, that need that first $25,000 to $50,000? We're providing a lot of the other pieces. These very cool innovation spaces like HQ Greensboro, HQ Raleigh, Iron Yard, American Underground in Durham. We've got the spaces, we've got the infrastructure, but often the one missing piece is that first little bit of money to help
getting that off the ground. Having an angel investor network.
Some of this is even pre-angel money. But
so how does your space fit into that? Where does your space get the private equity, the early financing? Are those the folks you're talking to?
So generally not. Usually the companies that we're talking to are a little bit more established. They've been in business for a period of time, so they're generating receivables. They've got inventory, and they're a little bit more sizable. Our demographic kind of starts maybe at $1 million and kind of up. So those younger companies like that aren't the people that we serve, but definitely they become the people we serve. And so we have a strong interest in figuring out how do we support those companies and encourage their growth. They're tomorrow's customers.
Let me ask you one thing, in 1 minute before we bring the guest on. This is hardly fair to say 1 minute and then kind of drop this grenade into the situation. Yeah, so, and I want you both to talk about this. So Brian, big debate in both North and South Carolina, transportation funding. We'll talk about this with our guest later, but how much of a liability is not having enough funding for transportation?
I think, North Carolina, we're in a pretty good position with transportation. We've got a great road system. Our logistics infrastructure is there. So I don't see it's as much of a liability here. I know our friends in South Carolina have some other issues they're dealing with right now, but I don't think that's it's as hot a topic
as critical
as critical for us right now.
Terry, 30 seconds. How big
Sure.
is this?
I think it's a huge topic. I'm relatively new to the area. I came here after 30 years in Chicago a year ago, and what surprises me is sort of the lack of any progress on it. When you look at the roads and you hear the business leaders talking about it, and you hear major corporations say, we're not going to bring more jobs unless we fix the roads, and yet the political system in Columbia seems stymied and broke and not having a real debate about making progress. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, certainly more to come on that. In just a second, we're going to meet our guest. Next week on this program, Dr. Nito Keating from High Point University has done unbelievable things over the last decade there. And next week, we will be talking to Dr. Keating about not just the growth of the university, what it's done in economic development, but Nito also has definite opinions about immigration reform. How does that factor into it? And then in 2 weeks, one of the few billionaires in the Carolinas, a gentleman named Bob McNair, grew up in Forest City, North Carolina, is now the owner of the NFL expansion team, the Houston Texans. He will be on our program next week, in 2 weeks. What can we learn, and how does supplemental insurance factor into this much more global debate on the insurance industry's role in our daily lives and our personal finances? We always talk about health care, but how does this fit into it? For 75 years, more than 10,000 salespeople now, 3 million customers, Columbia-based Colonial Life has provided coverage for disability, life, cancer, accident, dental, etc. We welcome now Colonial Life President and Chief Executive Officer Tim Arnold. Tim, welcome to the program. Good to have you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So, Tim, you sit in your office of this storied Colonial Life and supplemental insurance and doing some great things over the last 75 years or so. And I'm sure you've got opinions about the Affordable Care Act. So what can we learn about health care and the changing, this changing dynamic of health care from your industry?
Yeah, great question, Chris. From our perspective, the Affordable Care Act has actually helped raise the awareness around the need for medical benefits. So when it was first implemented last year, there was a lot of confusion about it, and small employers especially didn't really understand the law or what their obligations were around it. And so we were trying to help them get through that. But there was a period of what I would call stagnation. People just kept the benefits they had because they didn't really understand the law and their obligations. But now what we're seeing is that it's actually increasing demand for benefits themselves. We believe that most of the people who are signing up in the exchanges are going into the Silver plan. So the plan that provides a relatively modest level of medical insurance protection. And that really favors companies like ours, because when an employee signs up for a plan that has a really high deductible or a lot of out-of-pocket costs, they can actually fund those costs through a number of different products that we offer and companies like us in the industry offer to help them protect themselves and their families from gaps that may exist in that insurance coverage. So short term, a little bit of an issue. Long term, we see an opportunity. So,
and I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but so is it fair to say, Tim, that the uncertainty is getting a little bit more certain, but does the cost of the insurance, it seems like it's gone up. Has it become more prohibitive on the profitability of some of these small customers?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, although medical inflation's actually come down a little bit over the last few years, which is helpful. Yeah. The burden is on the smaller companies who in the past were not required to offer coverage. Now many of those are actually required to offer coverage. But what we're seeing is that the employers are taking on some of that cost, but they're also shifting a lot of the costs onto their employees, and that's where our products and products like the ones that we offer are very helpful to America's workers and their families.
Any insight of some of these smaller and mid-sized employers have not added people because of the increased cost or the uncertainty, remaining uncertainty?
Yeah, we're hearing that, and you see a lot of that in the media, especially companies that are bumping up against that 50-person employee limit. And we're hearing that there may be some of that happening, but we serve all size customers, and we have solutions that work for all size customers.
Yeah, okay. Ryan?
I'm curious, when you're talking about small businesses, have you seen any positive impacts from the Affordable Health Care Act? in terms of maybe providing more flexibility for startups to go out and leave that great healthcare package they've got with their company, go out and strike out on their own just because they know that they can now get insurance. Are you seeing any trends in that area?
Yeah, we haven't seen that yet, Brian, but we're keeping an eye on it. We think that the best thing about the small business market relative to insurance is that the law has created that awareness about the need, and we are seeing greater coverage levels now. Some with, as I said earlier, with very modest levels of coverage, but at least you're getting people into the system now.
Yeah. Jim, you're involved with the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and so maybe, do you have some kind of insight through that as to the broader picture of small and medium-sized business in South Carolina, and what needs to be done to help lift them up, kind of through the ranks and grow? Yeah.
Chamber's doing a lot of great work around the support of small businesses, starting with the infrastructure component. I heard you guys talking about that a few minutes ago. There's a lot of effort around making sure that we have the right infrastructure to support small businesses, and a lot of emphasis on education. Colonial Life's a big supporter of education. We have a strong relationship with the University of South Carolina, but also with a number of the other universities in the state. I believe that there's more that we can do to support the growth of small businesses. As you guys know, small businesses are the engine of the economy, not only in the state, but really in the country.
Yeah, right.
And about 75% of our customers are those small businesses. So we'd like to see even more emphasis on supporting them.
We hear in the press, in the popular press, a lot about, small businesses can't get a loan from the bank, they can't, get the money. Do you have a perspective on that? Again, kind of drawing on your chamber experience?
Yeah, that was definitely an issue a few years ago as we came through the recession and now starting to come out of it. But today we're actually hearing that there's capital available both from banks and also through VCs. Venture capitalist firms are willing to put money behind small businesses now.
Now, you're not setting that up because this is going to be a commercial for Accord Financial.
I wouldn't do that.
I'm kidding. Let's stay with the chamber thing a little bit, Tim. This is, you were talking about roads before you came on the program, and I know you have a definite opinion about roads. South Carolina and roads is almost as important as South Carolina and education. Where are we with the debate in roads? Where's the State House? Where is private business about this?
So private business is a very strong proponent of roads. In fact, the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce listed infrastructure as its #1 initiative this year. Good. Regrettably, it's my understanding that the roads bill is not going to make it through the governmental process this year. And that's disappointing. We certainly need some emphasis on infrastructure. The governor and her team have done a great job of bringing businesses into South Carolina, but we're really at a place now where the infrastructure just is struggling to support the number of businesses and the number of people in South Carolina. There's a lot in the press about the quality of roads or the problems with roads and bridges. There's a big initiative to widen the harbor in Charleston. And that's great because we can get the really big ships in with a lot of goods, but if you can't get them up I-26, it's a bit of an issue.
So is it, Speaker Lucas, when he took the job as Speaker of the House, said that was going to be a priority. Nikki Haley, who by all intents and purposes is the economic development governor, how can you do these things that these political leaders have said they're going to do without having the infrastructure, and who has the responsibility of moving the dialogue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would tell you, as a member of the Chamber, we are doing, I believe, all we can to try to advance that dialogue. And we have representatives speaking to people in the House and in the State Senate, as well as with the governor. There seems to be broad support for the idea of improving the infrastructure. It's just a matter of how you get there. I think that's creating the sticking point.
Brian?
Is there something that
hold on one second, Terry.
Sure.
Poor Brian, we've been kind of speaking around. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious too from an economic development standpoint. What do you see the role in South Carolina is of the university system, and how are they playing into a lot of what's happening in your state?
Yeah, it's a great question. The roads are playing, the universities are playing a big role for us, and we have, as I mentioned earlier, a great relationship with USC right there in our hometown, but also with a lot of the other universities, Clemson, Furman, Wofford. There's just a lot of universities there in South Carolina, and even in North Carolina, Davidson and others that we have strong relationships with. All the predictions are that there will be a shortage of workers in coming years as the baby boomers retire. And so the university system in the region, South Carolina and North Carolina, is critically important to helping us continue to have the talent that we need to achieve the goals that we have as an organization.
And one of the things we're seeing in our state is more inclination of the universities to be real partners in projects. You know, in the past we come up with a great project, we go out there and ask for money. Now we're turning the tables a little bit and going out and we listen to what businesses and community needs, then make the connections, form the teams, work on solutions together, and if we do that, then the resources will flow. So
absolutely.
I think that's going to be important for all of us moving forward.
No question. And we want to continue and strengthen the partnerships we have with the university system, both in North and South Carolina.
Sure.
So, Brian, we were talking about, I think, an interesting dynamic earlier before we came on the set about kind of the attitude about four-year degrees and technical, versus a technical degree. And all you hear in the manufacturing community is we can't hire enough skilled workers, and yet we know there's people looking for jobs. But we turn out lots of liberal arts majors who end up working in a restaurant. And do you have a perspective on that?
Well, actually, let me do this. We want to make sure Tim gets plenty of press. So take that question and ask him.
Yeah.
How do you ask him that?
Yeah, so is there something that we need to do more societally, not just in the education system, so that it's okay to not get a four-year degree, but you can still have a good paying job, which I think is kind of not the norm now.
Right, yeah. It is a great point, and I think it seems today that people really believe they have to have that four-year degree to compete, but we recently were meeting with a person who plays a big role in Midlands Tech Community College there in Columbia, and he was saying that he has become the advanced degrees for a lot of kids who have the four-year degree but aren't finding jobs. They come back to learn a skill or a trade there at Midlands Tech. And so those particular kinds of jobs aren't always as compatible with the things that we need, but I think that from a society standpoint, it makes a ton of sense to help kids who may not be interested in a four-year degree see that that's an opportunity.
So do you see the skills gap in your employment base at Colonial? Or I know you've got 10,000 plus salespeople, but do you see the skills gap making itself apparent?
At this point, Chris, it's not, but we are concerned especially about technology. So there's really high demand for people who have skills around technology, and we are beginning to see a gap there. We have operations in other places that have skills that we could tap, but we'd prefer to keep everything there in Columbia. So we're working with universities around that. We feel confident that we can solve that issue. And then on the math side, insurance companies have actuaries who need a strong math background. And so we're working with universities around ensuring that we have a nice pipeline of students who are excelling in math as well.
We've got a couple minutes left, and I want to get you on record for this question because I know you're going to have a very valid opinion. So South Carolina refused, North Carolina refused the federal Medicaid dollars on principle that the system was broken. But here we are now, 3 and 4 years into not accepting the money. How punitive has it been now that South Carolina does not take Medicaid dollars? And would you expect that there's going to be some relention, or that the governor will accept this sooner or later?
Yeah. I don't know that I'm the right person to have the strongest opinion on that. We believe that there's evidence that it is having some impact. We think long-term most states will have a ton of pressure from their residents to think about accepting those dollars that are out there. So for us, the issue is really about making sure that we're doing all we can to protect America's workers and their families with the products that we have, and we believe that we're working within the system in a nice way to make that happen.
Does it trickle down's not the right way to say. Does it reverberate out into the supplemental insurance business that the Medicaid dollars are not coming into the state? Do you see that?
Yeah, that particular thing's not as much of an issue for us, Chris. Where we see the issue is when people go into a public exchange and whether they're eligible for that subsidy or not. So it's not a Medicare issue so much as are the subsidies available under the Affordable Care Act available to people? Because if so, it makes the medical care more affordable, but also creates more of an opportunity for them to think about the products that we offer to protect themselves and their families.
Well, we got 30 seconds left. You're much more visible in the community, and not just talking about Columbia and Midlands, but in general. Why is that important to you?
Yep, so Colonial Life's had a long-standing reputation as a very important player in the community, and we think about our corporate responsibility in 3 areas. One's education. We've talked about that already. It's critically important. One's the arts. We believe any community that has a nice arts program will be successful as well. And the last is...
Don't you always hate it when you're under pressure? You always forget the
forget the third one.
Well, I tell you what, do this. We got 10 seconds left. Come back. We'll ask you more about community involvement.
Sounds great.
Tim, thank you. You're going to take some heat now at work for now.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Good to see you. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Glad to be here.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Until next week, good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.